Well, I'm gonna be honest, with the announcement of Riot Games shutting down their fighting game called 2xKO, it was funny to see more people talking about how the Riot MMO is totally getting shut down too, rather than talking about the game that actually got shut down. But here we are. 2xKO died in less than a year. And the first thought on everyone's mind was, is that also gonna happen to the Riot MMO? Well, in the case of 2xKO, it was very obvious why the development stopped. It was a fighting game that was aiming at casual players, but in reality, it wasn't casual at all. Fighting games are complex by default, which is why they almost never have casual audiences. If you want something casual, you kinda have to make a fighting game with 2 buttons and you just hope that people find a high level of play in it. I mean, that is exactly how Smash came to be. It was a very simple game for the casual players, but the pro players just found something in it. And so, since Riot is not afraid of shutting down their games quickly if they don't work, is it possible that the Riot MMO would meet the same fate? Well, the answer is no. 2xKO simply didn't have a way to turn itself into a live service unless it reworked its entire gameplay. When it comes to MMOs, they are also about gameplay, but there is a lot more you can tweak around the world and around the system to make the game good for all kinds of people. So even if the MMO starts burning, I can guarantee you Riot is gonna give it more than a year to figure out what's going on. Not to mention, the market of an MMO is at least 10 times bigger than a fighting game. With that said, just as Riot was in the middle of stopping the live development of one of their games, at the same time, the MMO industry did not evolve in the right direction, and we ended up with even more MMOs getting into trouble. While at the same time, one champion popped up and they proved they can do something cool in the MMO space, which resulted in last week bringing us very chaotic MMO news. And so, last week, once again, Amazon Game Studios decided to drop 2 MMOs. Somehow, this is not the first time this is happening. And this time they are dropping Lost Ark and Throne and Liberty. Now, neither of these games are getting cancelled, but Amazon is just figuring out that there is no way to turn MMOs into profit in the modern days. Meaning that both of these MMOs are going into self-publishing mode. Throne and Liberty announced it in their own post called An Update on Throne and Liberty in the West, where they confirmed that Amazon is stepping away, and the publishing responsibilities go back to the developer, meaning that NC is once again going to operate this game in the West. Now, from what I've heard, Throne and Liberty is actually a very grindy game that is mostly aiming for the Eastern audience. However, even in the West, it did have a decent start. Thankfully for us, it was also available on Steam, which means that we get the Steam charts. And so while the game started with an impressive peak of 330,000 players, which honestly is amazing, within a single year they dropped to 10,000 players, which would still be fine for a self-publishing team on a smaller scale, but it would not be fine for Amazon trying to pull off some profits out of this. Which is why this game is not shutting down, but it doesn't make sense for Amazon to stick around. And a very similar story also happened for Lost Ark. Lost Ark was perhaps even more aiming for the Eastern audience, because on top of this game also being very grindy, the vast majority of the grind can be skipped if you pay with real money. In fact, Lost Ark became infamous for being pay to win, with the only somewhat of a saving grace being the fact that this game is mostly PvE. And so the whales were quote-unquote helpful. And because we are talking about an MMO dungeon crawler, which is not too far away from Diablo, around the time when Diablo was not doing too well, Lost Ark actually got quite lucky and they rode the wave of hype. Meaning that on their launch day they peaked with over 1 million players. And now they are sitting at 7,000. Needless to say, the West doesn't really appreciate predatory microtransactions, especially when you spend your real money on an item that can break. And so, in a very similar manner, we got an official statement called An Update on Lost Ark in the West. What are the chances Amazon oversaw both of these posts? Anyway, here we also learn that the game is going into self-publishing mode, meaning that Amazon will be stepping away at the beginning of 2027, with Smilegate taking over. And here it was also confirmed that the game is not going away as long as it is running in the East, meaning that all of their updates will transfer into the West. Though interestingly enough, here when it comes to the account transition, they do mention that none of your mails or chat history will transfer over, which does also include the friend list that is getting wiped. How is that possible? I don't know, but remember, this game is being made with Unreal Engine 3. Anyway, with these, Amazon once again confirmed that the space of MMOs is not in a great place. Alternatively, they didn't pick the best MMOs, and so they only added to the count of the crumbling industry. Now, in case you forgot, all the previous Riot MMO rivals burned as well, because the Ghost MMO is in rubble, Ashes of Creation turned out to be a big scam, Xbox had massive layoffs that hit some big studio, which also included a big part of the Elder Scrolls Online team. Destiny 2 also stopped development, with the only new light at the end of the tunnel being the announcement of Guild Wars 3, proving that MMOs can still get ambitious. But it turns out Guild Wars are not the only ones trying something cool, because out of nowhere a new challenger dragged themselves up. And it turns out it is a challenger we mentioned quite a few times before. World of Warcraft is not the savior of the story. Yes, it is true that WoW is still doing well because it is really good at not doing much, but giving everyone the nothingness with a flavor of really good nostalgia. In other words, it is a pretty good comfort MMO food. Although everyone is still waiting for this to change this year, because BlizzCon is coming and everyone is expecting the return of classic WoW with more new content. As to what is going on with modern WoW, I'm not exactly sure, but I've seen a lot of people complaining about Disney-styled writing. And so, while they are in this temporarily vulnerable state, they got called out by Jagex. Now, Jagex are of course the developers behind RuneScape. And they came forth with a bold statement. Not only did they confirm that RuneScape seems to be the second biggest MMO, but they also confirmed that they are dedicated to going after the number one, which would be WoW. The dream is that we are not the number 2 biggest MMO brand in the world. We are number 1. There is a big old gap between us and number 1, but if we get it right, we know we can make headway. It's lofty and ambitious, but if you're going to set lofty and ambitious goals, why not swing for the top? So that's the number 1 goal. Now, to be completely honest, I have never tried old school RuneScape in my life. Nor did I ever try the modern RuneScape. But OSRS is something I always kept hearing about. It is an awesome MMO. Apparently it is also very different from the traditional MMOs. And so I really do have the urge to try it. On this channel I did already go through a few side quests with other games. And people always enjoyed them, so why not? Why shouldn't I try OSRS for the first time on this channel as I go into a Riot MMO research? So, one day. Anyway, because I haven't even tried it, apparently I missed out on the fact that RuneScape used to have some bad microtransactions. But the devs eventually removed them, which led to some pretty big losses. But in return, this allowed them to lure in more new players. And if they play their hands right with this, they can actually become the number 1 MMO, which would let them pull off the biggest heist in the MMO history. By which I mean that their player base would be really good, not what Ashes of Creation pulled off. Setting the table for growth is not the same as expecting growth to come as a result of setting the table. You need to put something on the table to bring people in. We've set the table, we've spent the last year not just removing that monetization layer, but overhauling so much of the clunkiness and the pain within the game. The guy who runs our RuneScape studio has been here for 13 years. He's been a RuneScape player for 20. The person calling the shots on how to bring this thing back to life was a player in its golden age. He's done a great job on getting the game into a healthy position. So less daily, less FOMO, less of the rubbish. And they closed their statement saying, "I've been told very clearly not to give anything away. But on October the 3rd, at RuneFest, we'll be announcing our equivalent of putting the feast on the table to really actively win people back. And that will be happening much sooner than many people expect." Now, what is really interesting about this is that this is pretty close to BlizzCon, meaning that Blizzard will be able to fire back immediately. And once that happens, if they actually reveal anything about Classic WoW, it will be a battle of two titans. Which makes me wonder, should I try OSRS before that? And while these two titans are fighting, it is likely the Riot MMO is gonna be sitting somewhere in a corner. Likely without an announcement still. That is assuming it doesn't get cancelled or anything like that. But once again, the 2xKO situation made everyone very nervous. Though the saving grace is that the Riot MMO is still looking for more people. And last time they were looking for a principal rendering engineer. So it was confirmed the game will have rendering.